WNST tassel the 4th of July holiday and onward and upward toward the trading deadline. Moving back homeward, as I guess Simon and Garfunkel once said. Luke Jones joins us now to talk about all things Atlanta over the weekend. And, of course, the Seattle Mariners in and the L.A. Angels in. We all thought we'd see Shohei Ohtani maybe, twirl the ball this weekend. That will not be the case. But certainly Chris Davis is back in the lineup, and they continue to tinker with all of the trade bait here, right? Whether it's Machado and Adam Jones, Brad Brock getting his turn, Zach Britton getting his turn, anybody they could deal here in the next 30 days. The problem is these guys have to be going well at some point to be dealt, right? Outside of Machado and maybe Jones.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And I think what we saw over the weekend, even though it was a nice weekend for the Orioles, I mean, they get a rare road series win, weren't able to complete the sweep on Sunday, but there were definitely some developments that you look to from a big picture standpoint, and some good, some bad, some ugly, but definitely some things that happened in that regard. But we've talked so much about Manny Machado, and rightfully so. I mean, you're talking about one of the best players in the game. You're talking about a kid who doesn't turn 26 until next month, and that's the Captain Obvious one, but you're still hoping you can get something for the likes of Adam Jones and Zach Britton and Brad Brock. And I think with Jones, we've talked about the fact that he swung the bat well. That's continued really from about the 1st of May or so. He got off to a slow start, but questions about him. Where's he going to fit defensively with wherever he goes? I mean, is another team going to be just plugging him into center field when you see where he is as a center fielder at this point? And then you look at Brad Brock, who has had an uneven season at best, and Zach Britton, who rebounded nicely on Saturday, but, well, Friday night took place in the case of him. So there's still plenty of questions there. And sure, Manny Machado is the biggest trade chip that they have right now that they're going to move. Certainly you could talk about guys like Bundy or Gausman if you wanted to, but I don't expect the Orioles to move anyone that's not a pending free agent necessarily. But you'd still like to really see Brad Brock and especially Zach Britton try to get on a roll here over the next few weeks, because right now you look at those two, yeah, I think they could move them, but I don't think you're going to get anything of market value in return for their services as it stands right now.
Well, you wonder what is all this rental about with Machado? What are 200 at-bats of Manny Machado and renting him into the postseason? What's that going to bring you back? What's that going to bring you back in regard to Jones or Britton or Brock or any other of the moving parts? I mean, Trumbo hit a home run over the weekend too, right? I mean, hit a grand slam at some point. So I don't think anybody's going to take the money on. But if the Orioles send a bag of money and mark Trumbo somewhere, maybe somebody needs a bat. I don't know how desperate they are to really clear the deck for next year. And for Brady Anderson, and we'll be talking plenty about that in the Dear Orioles series here coming up this week, next week, into the future. But I don't know what their real – I mean, they're stuck with Davis. So, that money's going to sit there. But it doesn't feel like they're stuck with anything else. I mean, it feels like they could deal Jonathan Scope now if somebody were willing to give them money and they didn't feel up to paying him $8, $10, $12 million a year, whatever those numbers are going to be once he hits arbitration, and you start to dangle that. But, I would think the Orioles should be open for business, and then there's the question of, well, who's conducting the business, right? And, I guess that's for us to figure out over the next 6 weeks, and who's taking the phone call. But who are the suitors? Who's going to be the one picking up the phone and saying, yeah, I want Zach Britton, I'll give you something for him? I mean, that ship may have sailed already, right?
Well, I think there are plenty of teams that would still take Zach Britton, but at what cost? At what price? I think there's probably 5 or 6 contenders who, if you just said, we're looking to deal Zach Britton, and you just look at that part of it in a vacuum, they'll be like, yeah, sure. We'll give you 1 or 2 okay kind of prospects, guys that are middle of the road, maybe someone that has some upside. But as far as the Orioles envisioning an Andrew Miller, a Aroldis Chapman kind of return from a couple years ago, I mean, it certainly feels like that ship has sailed, and the way that Britton has pitched since coming back certainly isn't helping anything in that regard. I mean, it was nice to see him rebound Saturday, but Friday night, I mean, the Orioles had that crazy ninth-inning comeback, and he couldn't get anyone out. The one batter he retired was thrown out at the plate. So gives up 4 runs, and the ERA is ugly right now. And look, we get it. He's just coming back from the injury. It's a really small sample. In the big picture, that wouldn't be something that would make me really bat too many eyelashes. But at the same time, you only have a few weeks to showcase him. And what we've seen so far, the command hasn't been there. The velocity hasn't been at its best, although it hasn't been horrible. But he just hasn't been optimal Zach Britton. And who knows? And this kind of goes back to what I said 2 winters ago after he was coming off of arguably the greatest season ever for a relief pitcher. I said at the time I thought it was organizational malpractice to not at least explore a trade for Zach Britton in the off-season of 2016 going into 17, and they didn't even entertain that. And we saw what happened last year. He got hurt early on with that forearm muscle issue and came back too soon and re-aggravated that and hasn't really been the same guy. He's been, he was okay last year. He was good, but he wasn't special last year. And so far what we've seen in only a handful of outings. So again, I don't want to make too much of it, but they need him to pitch lights out in a small sample because you only have a little over a month at this point to move him. So with him and Brad Brock, who gives up the home run on Sunday, and he's been inconsistent, and every time you think he's going to get on a roll, he takes a step back. You have 2 assets that have been superb in the past. In the case of Britton, historically special in the past, but where they are right now, yeah, I think you can find teams that would be interested in them, but at the price that they're presumably going to be asking, that's where it becomes very, very skeptical as far as if they're going to find a fit. And we kind of go back to what
that's where this 30-day showcase is important, right?
Sure.
That's where Brock going out and looking good for 4 straight outings, or Britton going out there, for the next week or week and a half, that by the time the All-Star break gets around here, you feel like you have a healthy, sound pitcher you're getting, but there's not much sound about the whole organization right now. On a day-to-day basis, you wake up every day thinking they're probably going to lose tonight, right? And I don't know what that means when these guys come into games, late in games, and situationally how other teams would view that versus their value in a pennant race in September and what they're willing to give up versus what other arms they can pull out of the bullpen that they already have, right? These are already first and second place teams. They're doing things better than this team is right now, right?
They are, but keep in mind, Brad Brock and Zach Britton have pitched in pennant races, and they've pitched in multiple pennant races. So I think that aspect of it, as far as how the team's doing, I'm not sure how much that weighs. I think it's just more so, Brad Brock gives up a home run on Sunday. He hasn't had too many issues with the long ball, but he's had a lot of issues with walking batters. You look at his walk rate, it's the highest it's been since he's been an Oriole. So, that's something that's a red flag. In the case of Britton, as I said, only a handful of outings, but, his sinker, when at its best, it's 96, 97 with some crazy sink to it. It's been more 93, 94, and, he was up to about 95 on Saturday. But still not looking as sharp as he can be. So you really are in that territory now where, hey, and these are free agents to be, so it's not just as though they're playing for their ticket out of Baltimore, out of a last-place team.
They're playing to be in baseball next year, right?
Yeah, they're playing for getting that more lucrative contract rather than just a modest 1 or 2 year deal. And in the case of Brad Brock, I'm not sure anyone's given him a 4-year contract, but this is a guy who made the All-Star team a couple years ago. Britton is a 2-time All-Star. I think he's a guy that is going to be fascinating on the open market this offseason to see who exactly buys into him, at least getting close to being back to where he was a couple years ago, or are you scared away by the forearm last year, obviously the Achilles tendon this offseason. So I think
it's hard to give him real money no matter what.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't think these guys are getting 2 years, $4 million. I think they're going to get more than that because I think the market dictates. Look at what Tommy Hunter got from the Philadelphia Phillies this past offseason. But that said, neither one of these guys are looking to be in position to get what they might have gotten a year or two ago on the open market. So the stakes are really high for them. So it's not just the Orioles want these two to pitch well, and certainly you can extend that to Machado and Jones, and you mentioned Mark Trumbo. I think if the Orioles would be willing to kick some money in, maybe, considering the way he swung the bat the last couple of weeks. But I think in the case of the here and now, you really just want to see Britton and Brock go out there and start stacking some consistent performances, because I think there is some value there. I don't think it's value that's turning around the fate of your franchise, but if you can get a couple decent pieces, maybe someone with some upside, maybe you have something in 3 years. But the way they're pitching right now, there's definitely some question marks, and definitely going to be some more reluctance from contenders to not to say they won't want them, but to give anything of real value for those guys. I think that's more of a question right now.
He is Luke Jones. He is Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. All of our WNST continuing coverage here, as well as airing of Peter Principles and the Dear Orioles series as we attempt to fix the Orioles, can be found out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault anytime, but also sponsored by our friends at Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. Billy Cole will be here to help me fix the Orioles a little later on in the week as well. You always see that heat coming in this time of year up on your roof. You don't know the damage you're doing up there. If you have a commercial or corporate roof space, you need our friends from Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. Can turn your roof into a green space as well. Big shout out to Michael's Cafe, where we hosted then Washington Capitals non-Stanley Cup winning coach Barry Trotz there a couple months ago. They have their outdoor patio now open. They got music out there on the weekends, delicious crab cakes, the split-level soup. You know where it is, York and Timonium Roads. Michael's Cafe, 34 years now doing it right. We're going to find a reason to get out there and check out a ball game sometime soon. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're using the app when you're downloading and at the gas. You're at the gas pump pumping gas. You can download the app and the time it takes to pump a couple gallons of gas. Get your points. Make sure you use it on the fried chicken and the Western fries. Make sure you're picking up that Kona Blend coffee in the mornings. It is Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Luke and I talking some current baseball, and here come the upstart Seattle Mariners. I got a lot of Mariners fans in my life. They're usually miserable. This is like the first year they're having a little bit of fun. They could potentially be a buyer before all this is over with, right?
Well, they already have been. I mean, they've made some moves already this season.
I meant for the Orioles. I mean, there are only a handful of teams out there that are in the pennant race, like literally in the American League. So, I'm like, let's sell to them. They gave us Adam Jones. We owe them a solid.
Right. Yeah, I mean, certainly Seattle, although if you're the Mariners, you might be taking some pause when you're trying to deal with the Orioles. When you
it was 3 general managers ago. Come on now.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, Seattle, everyone's talked about Houston in that division, rightfully so, the defending World Series champions. I think early on, even though the Angels have fallen off some, and certainly Ohtani being hurt and all the questions about his elbow and his future, whether he's going to hit and be a DH the rest of the year, whether he's going to have Tommy John surgery now, whether he's going to have it in the off season. So many questions, but they were clearly a team that had a lot of spice, a lot of interest early on because of Ohtani. And, they have the best player on the planet, Mike Trout. But Seattle was just, even with Robinson Cano's suspension, and they've had some injuries, they've just played incredibly impressive baseball. And they've kind of been that team in that division that a lot of people had pointed to, my goodness, going back the last 5 or 6 years, where they were always a team that, I don't know if I'd classify them as a sleeper, but they were always a team that people pointed to, and until recently with Houston blowing up the last 3 years, they were that team that said, okay, watch out for the Mariners. It was King Felix and some other young pitchers, and certainly we've seen pitchers emerge for them, such as Paxton, obviously. But they always just they underperformed for whatever reason. Whether it was their offense, whether it was some other element of their pitching that just didn't look good. And now you look at them and they're right within striking distance of Houston. They're 16 games over 500 going into the Orioles series, and
it's the first time they've come in here like being good in a long since Jay Buhner or something. Like literally, it's been a long time, right?
Yeah. I mean, you go back to the beginning of Ichiro's run in Seattle. They had that historic regular season. I mean, they they've had a long playoff drought. I mean, they've been one of those teams that hasn't been to the playoffs in a long time. So, it's really interesting to watch them and to look at some of their peripherals. I mean, the run differential is right around plus 10. So that tells you what? They've won a lot of close games. When they've lost some games, there have been some ugly games. But when you're that many games over 500, but don't have that great run differential, one, it makes people skeptical that you're going to continue that over the long haul. But two, it does speak to an ability to win close games. And I think with Seattle, even with everything they've dealt with Cano and the PED suspension, they've had injuries. They've just, they've found a way, and certainly Nelson Cruz keeps hitting, and they've got some other good players in that lineup. But it really has been impressive to see them kind of finally put it all together, so to speak. And they've done this without their best positional player all around. Although certainly Cruz is in that argument with Cano, but with Cano being out, they haven't really missed too much of a beat, and they've scuffled a little bit over the weekend. But boy, they've been a team that's really been impressive, really from the early goings in the season, and it's been amazing because King Felix isn't King Felix anymore. But they've gotten enough good pitching from other members of that rotation that you seem to like their chances, even if some of the peripherals don't scream dominance like their record suggests.
All right, we will get back into our Dear Orioles series. We got you covered for Seattle this week, and, of course, the L.A. Angels of Anaheim. They don't even use the Anaheim anymore. They're just Los Angeles down there in the south part of Southern California, not as far as San Diego. We'll see the Padres come in when they send their one All-Star next month. All of our Orioles coverage can be found out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault as we take a little bit of a respite here and examine all things in and around the baseball team in the Dear Orioles series, whether it's Buck Showalter or Brady Anderson or Dan Duquette or Peter Angelos or John Angelos or Lou Angelos or Mama Angelos or anybody named Angelos who's going to be affecting these deals and affecting the team over the offseason and what's going to become of all of this. That's why we're WNST, and you follow along. I am Nestor, nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and home all week watching the birds. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.